event. Tonight's roundtable event is part of the Architecture Week in Barcelona 2021, which is an event promoted by the City Council of Barcelona, as well as the Architects Association of Catalonia and the Fundació Mies Rohe, in collaboration with Barcelona Building Construmat and ArquinFAD. This evening, the discussion that we'll be having will focus on the green transition of cities through innovation and implementation of nature-based solutions as a means to provide cities with multiple ecosystem services towards passive and performative urban environments. The event is set in the framework of 2 EU projects within the main framework of the European Green Deal. So the 2 EU projects that are present this evening are Urbinat, so Urban Innovative and Inclusive Nature, which is a H2020 project, and Building Urban Intelligent Living Design Solutions, which is an ERASMUS Plus project. We have a wonderful panel of speakers coming from a diversity of professional backgrounds with the idea of facilitating in some way a clear and comprehensive panorama of how we can use nature-based solutions to transition towards resilient cities. With no further ado, I will invite our first speaker. So what we'll have is each speaker will give a 5-minute introduction, and I'd like to invite all of our attendees, if you have any questions, to please feel free to write the questions in the chat. And once the speakers have finished their presentations and we've had our initial discussion, I'll invite you to ask your questions directly or read them out if you're not able to sort of unmute or ask them yourselves. So again, with no further ado, thank you so much for joining us. Our first speaker is Gonzalo Canto Moniz. He is a researcher at the Center for Social Studies of the University of Coimbra. He's a PhD architect and now associate professor at the same university. He's coordinating the European project Urbinat, which I mentioned before. So healthy corridors as drivers of social housing neighborhoods for the co-creation of social, environmental, and marketable nature-based solutions. With 28 international partners, and as I was mentioning before, supported by the H2020. He's been publishing in the past about modern architecture, namely about school buildings, architectural education, and urban regeneration. So thank you very much, Gonzalo, and please feel free to take the stage.
Thank you, Matilda. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for this possibility of discussing the project with you all. So we have 5 minutes, so I'll try to be very direct to our proposal of Urbinat project. We would like to challenge this idea of the nature-based solutions and the inclusive urban regeneration with the proposal of healthy corridors. So the idea is to discuss the green corridors that traditionally are implemented in the cities and think about other dimensions. So we like to use this idea of the modern green. So this is a kind of a scheme that we start from the beginning, trying to understand what could be our approach to the urban regeneration, and especially to communicate with the citizens that are here represented, that we try to bring to our project to co-create the solutions with them. So to challenge the nature-based solutions, we try to address both the material and the immaterial solutions according to 4 typologies that we named as technological, territorial, participatory, and social economy. So the idea is to create multifunctionality in the city and address several layers and dimensions of the urban space. Of course, the territorial that are addressed by the urban farms, trying to bring the experience that already exists in the cities. Also the social economy as a way of promoting healthy food and bring people to develop together activities where they can bring some benefits for themselves and for the community, as these bread houses in Sofia. Also the technological solutions that are here represented by the beautiful game that IAAC developed for our project. And also the participatory and cultural ones that here are represented in the urban farm of Siena, where a beautiful auditorium is related with the urban farm, bringing culture, music, and other dimensions to the urban farm. Oh, sorry. So how we put everyone together in the city, working together, we try to use a lot of walkthroughs in the areas so that people think about and reflect about their needs, but also design their solutions together in the place, looking to addressing the problems directly in the reality. So we have here several activities with adults and children that we bring with their creativity to our project. And finally, one last slide of the last output of the project. So we are in the middle of the project of the urban plan, of the urban concept plan for Porto, where multiple nature-based solutions that are represented here with these several dots are related with this corridor that goes across the city, making connections and creating opportunities, as we see here in this reconstruction of an old ruin, of an old farm, with public space for solidarity markets that will try to activate the community around this new healthy corridor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. So our next speaker is Katya Perrini. Katya is assistant professor at the Architecture and Design Department of the Polytechnic School of the University of Genoa in Italy. Her main research interests are the effects and performance of nature-based solutions in the field of environmental and economic sustainability in and of urban areas and the building and urban design. Katya has an EU PhD, which she got from the University of Genoa. She's been a visiting student at Delft University, as well as Columbia and the Technical University in Munich. So thank you for joining us this evening, Katya, and please feel free to take the stage.
Thanks a lot, Matilde, and thank you very much for inviting me for this presentation. And so, the main questions driving our research approach are: how can we exploit nature-based solutions in order to improve ecological and environmental conditions of urban areas? And more specifically, once we monitor the performances at building scale or district scale or also at city scale, how can we optimize the design of nature-based solutions? The design in terms of microclimate regulation, water regulation, pollution reduction, cultural services, energy savings, and habitat. These are just some of the ecosystem services provided by nature-based solutions. I will now very briefly show some of our projects at the building envelope scale in order to try to explain for our projects, which is our, let's say, main research approach. So in 2014, we built a pilot project in Genova, and we monitored the performances of a vertical greening system. So we consider energy performance improvement, plant species design and selection, the quantification of air quality improvement, and the evaluation of users' perception. And considering relating all these aspects, we were able to evaluate the economic impact of the vertical greening system and also the environmental impact of this system. Just to give an example, an overview, so here you see we counted the amount of particles, fine dust, which were trapped by the leaves of this vertical greening system. And the idea here was to compare the effectiveness of different plant species in terms, of course, of collecting capacity. And we actually had quite interesting results. And we were able to say that by selecting the right plant species, you can actually better improve the air quality of an urban area. We also monitor the cooling capacity of the system, demonstrating that by extracting the air behind the foliage, relevant energy saving can be achieved. So it means that vegetation, as we all know, is very good with improving the with its cooling potential, but at the same time that some design strategies can be specifically adopted for a case study. At the same time, we also realized that the environmental and economic costs could also limit the widespread of such system. And since in order to obtain benefits, relevant benefits at the building scale, you need to be able to have a huge amount of nature-based solutions implemented in the same area, we thought that it was a good idea to try to explore innovative solutions in order to overcome the limits of the system on the market. So this is a low-cost and low-maintenance vertical growing system based on mosses. So we have mosses that grow mosses that grow through a paste on a low carbon support and substrate here. Now we are working on the optimization and performance monitoring of different configuration of the prototype in terms of cooling capacity, air quality improvement, and more specifically irrigation, so in order to reduce the loss of water through when we irrigate the model. I will then conclude my very short presentation by presenting very briefly the FAD Open project that we just started just this month. So the name of the project is ECOLOPS, Ecological Building Envelopes, a game-changing design approach for regenerative urban ecosystems. So here we aim at urbanization to be planned and designed in such that nature can co-evolve within the city. With nature, we consider also humans, of course. And ECOLOP aims to be a dynamic living space for animals, plants, and also microbiota. And all these components will modulate the environmental conditions, such, for example, as sunlight, water, and humidity. And they will create also some connecting ecological habitats and improving well-being for humans at the same time. Our aim is to focus equally on humans, plants, animals, and associated organisms. I was mentioning before the microbiota. And what we will do in ECOLOP more specifically will be to develop the technology which will allow to achieve this vision. So here you see a graph that shows the abiotic and biotic components we consider in the design process. We have humans, light blue, and plants, green, animals, microbiota that act as inhabitants. And here you can see the dynamic impacts and relationships among them. So the relationships among the inhabitants can change over the time. And of course, building material and design will have to somehow adapt themselves. So this is a very challenging project that we will I hope I will be able to show you more results in the future. And with this, I can conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Katya. Our next speaker is Gonzalo de la Cámara. Gonzalo is a Spanish economist who works worldwide. He's specialized in the economic management of natural resources, in particular water, climate, energy, air pollution, oceans, biological diversity, and ecosystem services, with an emphasis on their complex links with economic and social development. He's a senior research fellow and head of the Department of Water Economics at IMDEA Water Institute in Madrid. Gonzalo works for multilateral organizations such as the European Commission, to which he is the water policy advisor, various agencies and programs of the United Nations system, the World Bank Group, and the International American Development Bank. He's also a senior advisor and member of the OECD Water Governance Initiative, and he's recently published a chapter on ecosystem-based management. So thank you very much, Gonzalo, for joining us this evening, and please feel free to take the stage.
No, thank you, my pleasure. Okay, I'm going to share one image, but it'll be at the end of this first speech. I wanted to share like 4 main ideas with you. The first one is that there's been a lot of emphasis on the idea of, in the past, on the idea of mitigating uncertainty. And I feel that this current pandemic has shown that the uncertainty is here to stay. And therefore, what I would suggest is that we need a paradigm shift. It's very much about embracing uncertainty. And this entails very much uncertainty and complexity. And this entails very much that our solutions will need to be, by definition, adaptable, flexible, robust. And this is where I think that we find a very good entry point for nature-based solutions and other ecosystem-based management approaches. The second point is that there's a lot of talking about whatever has to do in terms of the ecological transition of our economies. There's a lot of talking in EU policy about climate change mitigation. So whatever has to do with energy transition and decarbonization of the economy and all that. But I think that the forecasting of all these discussions in the international community is always in terms of climate change adaptation. And again, when you're talking about climate change adaptation, I think the nature-based solutions, they have to be part of the story. The third point that I wanted to make is that what I would expect from a mature society is that we're able to discuss about who's actually paying for what no one seems to be paying for, right? So I feel that I do have the impression that we have like new public goods. One public good in itself is adaptation. Another public good in itself is whatever has to do with security. Security with multiple dimensions, so public health, energy security, food security, water security, etc. And again, I feel that if we actually discuss about risk management, we will see one of the main drawbacks, one of the main difficulties that nature-based solutions are finding in order to happen, in order to be actually real, not just at the demo site level, but being able to be upscaled and at a larger scale. And I'll give you some ideas on these, because I feel the nature-based solutions, in order to make them happen, we continuously face a number of lock-ins. One is institutional, because for instance, it's impossible to make significant progress in terms of nature-based solutions if you don't tackle the issue of sectoral policy coordination. So if everything that we end up doing with nature-based solutions is building impact remedial approaches, so nature-based solutions just to remediate the impacts created by agriculture, manufacturing, energy conversion, etc., this is never going to work. Secondly, we've got a technological lock-in. There is a preference for old conventional solutions, especially gray infrastructures. And I'll give you an explanation for that as well. I think that there's another lock-in that is strictly financial, not because there's no money out there. I talk to commercial financiers almost on a weekly basis, and they tell me we've got an appetite for this. So there is an appetite for climate change adaptation, there is an appetite for nature-based solutions. But the problem is that these money is never channeled to these nature-based solutions, because we've not understood that we need a strategic financial framework that is able to capture the multiple benefits of these solutions, which is not exactly what you would get from a conventional gray infrastructure. And the fourth lock-in that I see is very much one that I have over my shoulders, because I'm a scientist, I'm a researcher, and I feel that there is a problem in terms of the assessment. The way we tend to look at nature-based solutions, from my viewpoint, is very limited, it's very constrained. And this is the image that I wanted to share with you. I don't know whether you can actually see it. Yeah, we can see it. Can you see it? Right. All right. So I don't know whether you know these two guys. The first one, probably you don't know at all. And I mean, provided you're not like an expert in athletics, is Ashton Eaton from the USA. He's the best athlete in the world in terms of decathlon. So he's able to excel in 10 different trials at the same time. The second one, who's now retired, is still the fastest man in the world. Even retired, I'm sure that he's probably the fastest man in the world. Usain Bolt from Jamaica. Okay, what happens if you ask Ashton Eaton to compete Usain Bolt, running fast? He will lose 1 million out of 1 million. It's impossible for Ashton Eaton to be able to beat this guy. But what happens if you take Usain Bolt and make him try hard in terms of decathlon? That he will not be able to be as good as Ashton Eaton. Well, Ashton Eaton is a nature-based solution. Usain Bolt is a conventional specialized solution. Okay, if we don't create the right assessment framework for nature-based solutions so as to capture the multifunctionality and the multiple benefits of nature-based solutions, nothing's going to happen at the right scale. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. Our next input will be from Nana Ostergard. Nana holds a master's in landscape architecture and urban design from the University of Copenhagen. Since 2016, she has been working at both the Copenhagen and Oslo offices of SLA and has worked with nature-based design in many different scales and contexts, from strategic development plans to detailed design, and contributed to the studio's research and development team, S-Lab. Thanks so much, Nana, for joining us, and please feel free to take the stage.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me for this event. I will just share my screen. I have a short presentation. Here you go. Do you see my screen now?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay, so as you said, I work for SLA, which is a design studio based in 3 different offices across Denmark and Norway. We work in a very interdisciplinary work environment where we believe that not one discipline on its own can solve these very complex issues, whereas why we need generalists, but also very much specialized experts within a variety of fields and disciplines working together in order to actually meet the challenges of the urban environments today. As a very simplified goal for our work, it is that everything we build, whether it's buildings, public space, or infrastructure, it should increase nature value, biodiversity, and quality of life in the city. We work within this paradigm shift that we see today, where the whole way that we kind of perceive and develop our cities are changing, luckily. So we're kind of moving from a very modernist functional separation between city and nature onto a nature-based city, or that's what we are working towards anyway, where both the build and the grown functions on the premises of nature, but also as a combined system rather than individual solutions kind of strengthening each other. This is where we get to the integration of nature's ecosystem services, where I think, Gonzalo, you were very much on point that we should not try and work with a single parameter in the design. Rather, we want to see our projects and our designs kind of function across several parameters. We like to divide these up into what we call utility values that are kind of focused on the physical environment, tackling CO2 reduction, air quality, urban heat island effect, and so on. But also at the same time, we want our design to increase biodiversity and also create quality of life for the people living in the cities, and in that sense, creating social spaces as well. So these are not just solutions for climate adaptation, for example. It is also a framework to make it a good place to live, and as such, our cities should actually kind of function in a whole different way than it does now, where everything is designed on the premises and principles of nature. So our design method is basically rooted in the processes and principles of nature. Obviously, working within the framework of a city, we can't just copy paste nature as we know it from quote unquote the wild, but that is still a system and a foundation that has all the parameters that we need to work with. So our design is often based on research, both our own, but also most definitely other people's research, and an effort to kind of translate the already existing principles of nature into design parameters for the nature that we then adapt into an urban context. And in that way, we are not necessarily as a starting point very focused on the form, but very much focused on the function, because this is natural systems that should function on the same principles as nature as it would do on its own. As a brief example, I would like to show you this project called St. Kjeld Square, which is located in central Copenhagen. It used to be a heavily paved and heavily trafficked area with very little urban space quality to it. It was put in an offer as a part of the Copenhagen municipality climate district. That is a cloudburst project. So the premise was initially to manage stormwater on the surface rather than in pipes. And the project is now like this, where we've transformed more than 9,000 square meters, more than 2/3 of the formerly paved area into green space. The traffic has been sanitized, but it's also prioritizing bikes and pedestrians, and thus limiting speed limits and so on. So it functions within the logistics and the infrastructure of the city, but it also creates social spaces, recreational value. It has measurably increased biodiversity. It has also increased given economic value to the area, because there's been an increase in property value, but also businesses in the area. And thank you. That was that for me.
Thank you so much, Nana. We now have Martin Peterson. So Martin is a senior research analyst at City Facilitators. He works in the field of urban development and excels at analysis, and brings with him experience in and deep understanding of governance, finance, and the potential of climate-friendly technology and innovation to ensure that cities and countries can inclusively grow their economies while also becoming greener. Thanks so much, Martin, for joining us, and please feel free to take the stage.
Thank you very much, Mathilde. I will share my brief story working with NBS and what I've learned of it so far. Just a second. So my background working with NBS is coming from the angle of green innovation in terms of startups and SMEs. So my first experiences of NBS are, I think, probably a bit different than most of the presentations we've seen so far. It was a combination of technology and nature, and see how both could be used to enhance citizen well-being. This one was from Green City Solutions, whom I worked with in Berlin, I think in 5 years ago or so. And later on, I started seeing a pattern where the beautiful thing about NBS was that they were so extremely resource efficient. They solved so many issues at the same time. So what we see here is LG+, and they found out that for these water dams, they could use a specific type of algae, which would decrease the evaporation from the water dam, and hence allow the dam to produce more power. At the same time, the algae would also clean the water and help nourish a richer biodiversity system beneath them. And that later on led me to doing build along with Chiara and Mathilde. And there I saw the same thing, this tendency to combine technology with plants, where the plants would quite often be used to filter out particles that would be unhealthy for human beings, and then reused through the ecosystem. A huge change for me personally. I changed career, and what I noticed was once I had been working with the innovators, it was hard for me to understand why is it that so few of these great solutions are implemented. And that's really what I learned once I changed over to working directly more with people who run governments, was that too many of them were not of a sufficient size and wouldn't quite actually mitigate enough damage compared to the kind of concerns that a mayor of a town would face. So instead they would be looking to solutions that they already knew and trusted, rather than solutions that might have been proven, but where they didn't know any examples themselves. This is an example of an anti-flooding and nature-based solution where you have a water park. So it serves multiple uses here. Citizens can work out and so on, but also the area is now storm protected for the next, I think, 20, 30 years. We see another example, and in Denmark that has been starting. It's been happening almost everywhere, and that surprised me a little bit when I then started working on a project in the Maldives, where they have been removing a lot of the mangroves. So suddenly they're facing the issue of flooding, and will have to just redo the destruction that they have basically just wrought. So I hope that in the future we will see maybe not an over-reliance on NBS either, but at least that we can see NBS be used as a tool in decision makers' toolkit. Because the beautiful thing about the example from the Maldives was to see that the rural population can manage all of these mangrove forests, and also harvest them for for goods that they can trade, or fruit that they can directly live off. So there was a symbiotic relationship where it ended up both helping the entire country, the people living there, and the rest of the earth. It's the highest amount of CO2 sequestration you can get is mangrove forest. As I said, I don't think that we will only be able to rely on that, because if we, for example, with mangrove forest, you would not be able to produce enough food. The Maldives would also need to combine with other nature-inspired solutions, but are definitely not natural, such as vertical farming. And I think in the future, that is more what we'll be looking into, is this mix of very natural solutions and then high tech on the side to make sure that we can get our needs met. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Martin. Our next speaker is Maria Pia Fontana. Maria is an architect with postgraduate studies in urban planning and in graphic and editorial design. Since 2000, she's been a partner of the Barcelona-based studio Mayorga and Fontana, where she works on public space and park projects, as well as interventions to improve housing, facilities, centers, and school environments. In 2018, she founded City FOV Urban Lab, where she explores with an interdisciplinary team new approaches, methods, and tools for the urban project, with the use of new technologies and modalities of technical and participatory design processes, with an emphasis on ecological vision, livability, and sustainability for the contemporary city. So thank you very much, Maria Pia, and please feel free to take the virtual stage.
Thank you very much. It's good. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. It's perfect.
Okay. So good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's very pleasure to stay with you every time. And I want to share with you some reflection about the green transition of cities through nature-based solution. In my five minutes presentation, I try to say a lot of things. Sorry for this. I will be very fast, but I think it's important to make a little context to the solution that I explain you after. So I'm going to start with a reminder of a series of concepts from reference authors that explain that we can learn from nature and how we can apply this teaching in design. So I will talk about 6 lessons that we can learn from some people. First of all, learning from nature. We will all remember that all the time of total confinement in March 2020, an empty city became a kind of more comfortable space for wild animals to come down and deserted streets. And it is also striking to visualize in this drawing on the right the different forms that the Mississippi River channel has assumed from 1645 to 1944 as a form of constant adaptation. So first lesson, to adapt. We continue remembering Jan McGarg, who in 1969, 50 years ago, in this book, Design with Nature, tell us about his method of analysis and understanding of the landscape through concepts such as multifunctional design, repeated processes, interaction. So second lesson, interact. On the other hand, Richard Foreman in 1995, in the book Land Mosaic, explained how to understand that animals, water, wind, and people flow at different rates according to spatial patterns common to almost all landscapes and regions. Third lesson, so identify and build patterns so we can find order in something that seemed to be really disorder. We continue with Gilles Clement with the Gardening Movement of 2021, a very recent book, where he claims our condition of gardeners and ways of life that make us reflect on the responsibility towards our urban spaces. So 4 lessons, we are all gardeners. We arrive to another point, really important for the project in architecture and urbanism, morphology and topology, things and relation between things. Nuno Porta says that things are as important as the relationship between things to understand and transform our environment. And in the same way, in these 2 drawings from a project of Denise Brown from a university campus in USA, we see in a comparative way an interpretation of the same reality. From the representation of the physical space on the left, the morphology and the relationship that are generating through the activities and movements of the user on the right. So 5th lesson, spaces and networks of spaces that define the basic input to transform. And the last example before the project, Aldo van Eyck, I think that a lot of people can knew him, but it's important to remember the work of Aldo van Eyck because it's really similar to the project that we are doing, and I will explain after. To approach our specific project theme, it is worth recalling the experience of Aldo van Eyck in Amsterdam, where he carried out hundreds of projects of reclaiming parks and interstitial spaces of the city that end up configuring a very powerful network of playgrounds and green spaces for rest and play. All the parks, moreover, in a logical of interescalar design, are projected from an articulation of very basic design elements according to modular and abstract logics. So 6th lesson, spaces, network of spaces, elements, and articulation of elements. So we arrive to this second part of my presentation, and I will present some project and a strategy that we are carrying out in progress in Barcelona in this moment, in this last year, which are based on some of these ideas that I just explained before. This is a proposal for an integrated network of centers, playgrounds, paths, school environment in Barcelona that proposed nature-based solutions based on strengthening the relationship between schools and green spaces through the interscalar and networked approach as a small-scale solution to the series of pollution problems of our cities. An interactive and open platform that allows us to analyze and generate a basis for intervention. The idea is to value the different actions that are already being carried out in the city from the City Council, like Compromís de Barcelona pel Clima, Pla de Mobilitat, el Plan de Verde la Biodiversitat, y así como the refugees climatics. It is very recent, a very recent work. It is about recognizing that a global and broad vision can be achieved from the small, reinforcing schools as neuralgic place of the city and promoters of urban life of proximity. It is about an urban school network that, due to its environmental condition, can become a green infrastructure of climate refuge for Barcelona, and that initially is verifiable through the superposition of different networks, network green-blue components, network of educational and recreational facilities, network of sustainable mobility, the observation of the demographic profile of citizens to know their needs, like in this image on the left, the use of environmental indicators like noise, air quality, location of station of NO2 measurement by zones in school on the right. And finally, participation is encouraged with this platform by means of an online map drawing tool that allows saving and sharing the maps generating. So it is also a matter of promoting and enhancing the value of existing network of green spaces and vegetation and relating it to existing school roads and school playgrounds and school environments. The idea of this platform is to recognize the existing, articulate and propose a series of projects from the environmental improvement of a street to the improvement of an interior courtyard through comprehensive project based on modular and repeatable elements of different scales. So only like an example, I show you some project to improve the networks of courtyards of the several schools in Barcelona. For example, here, the 4 p.m. school in Sanche, like an interscalar work that we do from the exterior of the city to the interior of the courtyards. And here, another project of the Quattro Cantons Institute in Poblenou, where we make an intervention in the playgrounds connected to the exterior spaces and connected to the green spaces in the exterior of the cities. All these projects, all these ideas are a question of weaving of an urban network of climatic refuge, articulating and strengthening the city's green network with the network of the school and school facilities, park, tree-lined streets, small neighborhood gardens, school environment, and schoolyards. So to conclude, finally, the Climate Refuge Network has won the World Database Challenge in 2019 awards and has been selected a few months ago to be exhibited as a representative project of the 11th International Biennial of Landscape 2020 in Barcelona. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Pia. Okay, and now to our last speaker for the evening, Chiara Farinaya. Chiara is a PhD architect and urban planner, and her research focuses on environmental planning and design. Chiara is currently head of EU projects as part of the Advanced Architecture Group of IAAC, and her position includes being a coordinator and scientific personnel in several of our EU projects targeted at education, research, development, and implementation, as well as being faculty in our educational programs. So thank you, Chiara, and go for it.
Thank you, Matilda. So the title of my lecture is Hybridizing Built Environments and Living Systems, which is currently blocked, of course. Voila. Of course, we are working with nature-based solutions, and nature-based solutions are living systems that are providing cities with multiple ecosystem services. And what are the ecosystem services? They are defined as life support, like soil formation, oxygen production, procurement, like production of food, drinking water, raw materials, regulation, like climate control, water purification or pollination, and cultural values, like aesthetic, educational, and recreational values. So the question of my inputs from today is how can digital technologies support us to integrate the living systems into the urban environment, providing cities with multiple ecosystem services. So now, through a few examples, I'm going to give you some examples of digital technologies that are supporting the integration of living systems in the cities. So the first project that I want to quickly show you is photovoltaic, and the ecosystem services that it's addressing are food and energy production, water saving, flooding mitigation, and oxygen production. Which are the digital technologies that are we using in this case? On one side, we were using parametric programs to define the upper surface of this tile. The tile is aimed at water, at capturing, so the upper surface of the tile is aimed at capturing the water, bringing it towards holes where we grow the nature-based solutions. This box that is below is a box that is equipped with a biophotovoltaic system, and the biophotovoltaic system is a system that is harvesting the energy that is producing, that are producing the bacteria that are living near to the plant roots. So these bacteria are producing small or emitting small quantities of energy, and it's possible introducing an anode and a cathode to harvest this energy. So the system is harvesting the energy and producing energy, therefore, and we are cultivating food within this system. Going back to the technologies that we are using in this case, we were using some parametric programs to study the upper surface to collect the water and to bring it towards our nature-based solutions and towards the soil. In this case, we were using the parametric programs to create a surface that can be adapted to the different local conditions. So in case in which we are in heavy rain in areas where it's raining, where we have a lot of rain, like in the north of Europe, for example, we have bigger holes and a different morphology to collect the water. In case of Spain, for example, where with the water collected, we can grow just few plants, we will have some small holes. With parametric programs, it's possible to change quickly the surface and to have a new configuration. When we have to produce these different configurations, we need a digital manufacturing, which allows us to create non-standardized parts, non-standardized elements that can be adapted to a certain area. In this case, we were using CNC machines and create molds to create this element. And in the pictures, you can see the prototype that we tested. With a similar principle working, we were like 3D printing, using the technology of 3D printing to create vertical walls. So on the left image, you can see the research on which is based this prototype that you can see on the right side. So we were basing our on a large scale Adobe 3D printing research, our further research that was how can we integrate in vertical walls which are 3D printed nature-based solutions. We were creating this project that you can see in the image with the flowers. This has been implemented in Barcelona in the framework of the Comida project, and it is a system that again is producing food but is also producing energy with the same biophotovoltaic system that I was explaining you before. This is now in further development within the framework of the project Comida, and we are co-designing with the citizens a big scale, a large scale wall, which will be realized through the 3D printing, which give us the possibility again to do non-standardized parts and to create the wall that is co-designed with the citizens. Then the next project is Biomoon, which is a project intended for gray water phytodepuration, energy and oxygen production. So in this system, we were using plants that are phytodepurating the water. So this is a project to phytodepurate the gray water of the buildings. We were collecting the water of the buildings and phytodepurating within this cascade system of elements with plants that are like eating the pollutants, growing thanks to what we call pollutants in the case of the water, or what can be considered pollutants in the case of the water. And we are also again producing the energy with a biophotovoltaic system that is implemented. In this case, we were using, again, digital manufacturing to produce these elements and the prototype that you can see in the left image. In this other example, Microscape, this is a project that is aimed at food production and construction material production. So this is a wall that can be implemented in the facades of the buildings. And within this project, we were like simulating the conditions of a forest. So, and simulating, as you can see in the image, the like the trunk of a tree, in order to create an optimal environment for the mushrooms, for some mushrooms to grow. The system is aimed to grow mushroom in the city. These mushrooms that you can see here are oyster mushroom that the people and the citizens that are cultivating this mushroom can eat. Within these triangles that you can see in the image of the prototype, in the picture of the prototype, we are also creating construction materials, in the sense that in order to produce this mushroom, we need to mix the mushroom spores with some straw. This in 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, the mushroom spores are colonizing the straw, and they are creating a strong like construction material that can be used, for example, to produce bricks. And in this way, we are at the same moment using nature-based solution to produce food and construction materials. When the cycle of 3 weeks is ended, we cut the food that is available to be eaten. We bring out from the system the construction material, and we start the cycle again. This is a project created with within the framework of Build Solution Project with our students. And in this case, we have a column which is 3D printed with a photocatalytic material that is improving the air quality through the properties, the chemical properties of the material. On the other side, still to work on the oxygen production, we were implementing plants, in this case aerial plants, within this column that is optimized in order to create a microclimate for the plants to be grown. A very last example is an app that we created for the co-management of a orchard, of a common orchard for the citizens. And this is an example of how to use digital technology for the co-management of nature-based solutions. And this is the project that Gonzalo was before mentioning, the Superbarrio project, which is an app that is developed in order to co-design with the citizens the green and healthy corridors. The citizens can choose the nature-based solutions they want to implement, bring it in this digital environment, visually simulating how they look like, and they are also going to see which is the impact, visualizing the impact through very easy to be understood indicators. So I would like to leave you with this question, that is, can we build the cities of the future basing them on nature-based dynamics? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chiara. So thank you very much to all the speakers for your fantastic input. Oh, sorry, there's an ambulance going past. This has been really interesting. I don't know if someone wants to jump on Chiara's question, but maybe what I'll do is I'll give you a prompt. The first sort of question I'd like to pose to the panelists is, what are some of the most promising innovative strategies or game changers, as Katya mentioned, that allow us to in some way evolve from this great infrastructure or old solutions, which Gonzalo mentioned, for the integration or collaboration of nature-based solutions in the built environment? And I think also it would be interesting to have an idea of what is your experience on what are some of the tools or toolkits that make these nature-based solutions more accessible to the wider panorama of architects and designers. And I had thought that maybe Katya could jump in on that question first, but it's a question that's also for Nana, Gonzalo, Maria Pia, and Chiara, of course. So Katya, I don't know if you'd like to try that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matilde. So actually, two questions, let's say. So to the first one, So to the first one, well, we really understood that creating cost-effective and measurable nature-based solution systems is definitely very important. So for one side, making sure that these systems can be cost-effective and that you're able to demonstrate this aspect. So municipalities, but also clients and architects, they will ask you about what is the benefit and how long do I take to get a payback period and stuff. So from my perspective, my point of view, first of all, is making sure that, let's say, initial costs are not too crazy, at least for some types of systems and products. And when they're not, making sure that they can, that the replicability can be interesting, and that maybe the benefits can overcome anyway the costs of these aspects. So for example, if you make a very, very super fancy and super nice system for a hotel and stuff, this of course can be done and should be done, but you have to be aware that this is going to be a one case scenario, let's say, while from our perspective, we're trying to develop some researches, some systems which could be replicated on a wider scale. Because at the end of the day, if you don't apply nature-based solutions in the urban context, you will not get enough benefits, let's say. I mean, only one system is not enough. I hope I was able to answer.
Yes, I mean, I guess that ties back into, in some way, what Gonzalo was saying earlier, no? Related to the understanding of what costs or what values are we associating to these nature-based solutions. So of course, when you're talking about the like, in some way, cost effectiveness, you're talking about an economic cost, whereas, you know, the values that we're interested in some way in promoting are much broader, no? So touch on, of course, cultural, environmental, social values. So I don't know if, Gonzalo, you want to jump in and give us 2 cents on how we might be able to promote that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I feel, I do have the impression that sometimes there are, even if we know that nature-based solutions are good by definition, you know, like we are all convinced, we don't need further persuasion about this. But I feel that there are some myths that are preventing us from making additional progress. One is that we tend to feel that almost every measure that increases, for instance, the biophysical flows of ecosystem services is a nature-based solution, and it's not. So nature-based solutions are a subset of measures contributing to the wider delivery of ecosystem services. The second one is that nature-based solutions emulate natural functions, but as you've shown in many projects, you know, and I recall some of the projects recently mentioned by Chiara, in fact, you can actually use technology in order to emulate natural functions. And I think that's the critical point about nature-based solutions, that it's not about plants and flowers all the time. It's about being able to make a difference, because what actually makes a difference is the end and not the means always. Yeah. And the third point is that nature-based solutions are not, sorry, like the enhancement of resilience and the delivery of ecosystem services is not the end, but the means that make these nature-based solutions relevant for resource efficiency and sustainability. So one of the problems that I feel that we have, and when I was listening to some of the illustrations, very interesting, all of them, but when I was looking at them, I was actually wondering whether these selected group of experts on nature-based solutions could actually think about connecting those nature-based solutions to wider social and economic development goals. Because if not, we end up being quite self-indulgent about this, which is, you know, we've got plants, and I've discussed this personally with Matilda, but, you know, we've got plants and we feel that plants will be able to mitigate pollution indoors. But in fact, there is a marginal effect of that. And I think that as long as we do not discuss about the optimal spatial scale for these nature-based solutions, we will never be able to actually make a difference in terms of the outcomes of these processes. I don't know whether you agree with this.
I don't know if Nana, you wanted to jump in. I saw you nodding there.
Yeah, well, I'm just, I totally agree that it's not a zero-sum game in that way, that you need to kind of combine forces across the board, because it's not just about plants and it's not just about technology. It's about combining all of these efforts into kind of increasing value, and also figuring out how do we tackle, I think especially tackling multiple challenges at the same time, instead of trying to kind of isolate, now we tackle stormwater management, or now we tackle this and this. Because if you want to really, I think, be serious about talking about nature-based solutions, we need to also emulate the dynamics and systems of nature. Like, nature doesn't function on a one system at a time kind of basis. And this also means that, I mean, project by project or whatever we do, we need to kind of evaluate the impact and consequences on other parameters. When you kind of make an effort there, that has consequences on different or a separate kind of parameters. And I think kind of combining all of these and kind of making sure that you actually are talking about a holistic approach, because you are talking about something that is systemic in that way. I also think, kind of adding on to also continuing a little bit what Katya said before, I think it's what is kind of happening right now. I think what is super interesting is that we're kind of moving away from nature being a kind of a nice icing on the cake in urban projects, but much more of an integral performative part of the projects. And I think now, after an agenda that's been pushed for years, we're also starting to kind of gather that, like, the evidence base to actually push these agendas more, because we can now actually point to very specific performances across the board in many ways. And I think at least that's an experience we have here in our work context, that it is actually something that municipalities and developers, they're actually starting to look at the investments into nature-based solution as something that is a sound economic investment for them, because it will pay back to their project. It will also give something back to their image, for that matter. But I think in that way, we're starting to see a new kind of interest in investing in these kind of performative urban spaces and buildings, for that matter. I mean, it's the whole urban fabric that should be included in this. Yeah.
Yeah, Gonzalo, you wanted to jump in? Gonzalo with the C.
Yes. So with the C, no, I would like to bring also some perspective. You asked what is the most promising strategy to address these topics, and I would say that my key word is people. Is people in the sense that in several dimensions, and one I think that is more important, and it really creates value to the cities, is engaging the citizens, the community where we are working, but also the citizens in a more general way, but also everyone that is rethinking the city to these topics, and how we address that is not by bringing solutions that people are not involved in. So what we have been seeing is that people in general, they are very aware of the needs for a green approach to the city, but the green approach that is also bringing other ways of using the city. So it brings other activities to the public space. And that is very interesting. And when we developed our participatory activities in our project, most of the people, they say, we know that you are going to develop very nice green solutions, but we want to develop with you how we can complement these with economic activities, with cultural activities, with social activities that in fact bring the community around the discussion of the public space, and that is meaningful for them. So I think that's the key word to improve our relation with nature-based solutions, is to develop what we call co-creation process, of course, starting from participation, but going through all the phases of the urban planning, where we develop solutions according to the citizens' needs and not expecting, not according to our needs or the governmental needs or the company's needs. And that is key for changing awareness to the environment, awareness to climate change, awareness to quality of food production. So I think that's that's our main goal, let's say.
Thanks, Gonzalo. Actually, yeah, I was thinking also in relationship to what Gonzalo with a Z was saying about connecting nature-based solutions to wider economic and social goals. And I had actually thought while you guys were presenting, you know, to maybe like understand also how the designs and the research that everyone here develops on nature-based solutions in some way facilitate a change in the way we relate as citizens to the context around us, you know, so going from kind of a consumerist perspective of the context to understanding how we can collaborate with our context, no? I don't know if Pia, you want to jump in on that? That would be great.
Yes, I only want to do that, to say that we are talking about the nature-based solution, but I think that we have to divide two concepts: the nature as approach and the nature as a space in which we can work. So the nature can learn a lot of things to us. I think that is one of the most important lessons that I have understood. And for this reason, I present the first part, because the nature learn us a tool, no, give us a tool to approach the problem. And on the other side, we have to make solution with the nature, but the important is the ecosystemic approach that I think that we have to do, we have to think, no, and to learn from nature. And from this reason, I like to repeat the sixth lecture, no, that I try to synthesize before, to adapt, to interact, to identify and build patterns. I think that the disorder of the nature is not true, because there is an order, and we have to understand, no, the order of the nature. But, and we are all gardeners. I think that the lesson of the Gilles Clement is one of the most important in this moment, because not only architects are responsible for the urban spaces and for nature, but all people. No, we are all responsible of our environment, and so in this sense, I think that as an architect, I feel free of all the responsibility, because we are all citizens, and all we have to, no, make better cities and become gardener for a while.
If I may, Matilda? Yeah, I just wanted to give an example of why I feel that self-indulgence is one of the drawbacks preventing us from further progress in nature-based solutions. Just think about a buffer strip to control water and soil pollution. Yeah, and this is, you know, it's quite easy from a technological point of view, it's demanding. But think about that buffer strip, either in a pristine catchment in northern Sweden or in southern Italy. It will work in Sweden, it will never work in Italy. So can we actually say that that nature-based solution is good or bad? It depends. And I feel, and I fully agree with what Gonzalo was saying, that we need to combine, there is so much tactic urbanism and so few strategies, actually. Like if we're talking about nature-based solution, we're actually talking about ecological transition. This is a transition. We need a stable roadmap. We need predictability of public policies, and we need to be able to combine more strategic top-down approaches yeah, such as maybe part of what we're discussing today with what Gonzalo was saying about, you know, bottom-up, meaningful stakeholder engagement, so that we can actually connect to what citizens are actually demanding. And what citizens are actually demanding is not necessarily the reduction in the concentration of NO2 in the atmosphere, because they don't actually have a clue about what NO2 concentration is. We need to be able to match their expectations. And this implies that we need to speak the same language. I'm not talking about being simplistic. I'm not talking about populism. I'm talking about real, meaningful stakeholder engagement.
Thanks, Gonzalo. Maybe it's interesting if I can call on Martin to give us some input about how, you know, speaking of this meaningful stakeholder engagement, in some way how new businesses can be formed or startups can play a role in the innovation of nature-based solutions, in some way advancing the technology readiness level to be able to democratize, I guess, in some way, nature-based solutions towards a wider adoption.
Thank you, Matilde. I actually do not think so much it's the question of whether the startups are trying to do it or they want to do it. I just wrote earlier that for more nature-based solutions to be encouraged and for them to become more normal, I think we would benefit tremendously for if we started to just have a standard amount of our public tenders for big gray infrastructure, we could say above a certain limit, which would be set aside for either innovation or climate resilience or nature-based solutions, or all of the above. And smaller tenders right now, they're just quite often the problem with stuff like nature-based solutions or green technologies in general is that they have positive market externalities, which that's a good thing. But when they're competing for public tenders in most countries, they are governed by law and they have to go to the cheapest option. So there's also an educational element on demand side, public demand side, that needs to happen. I think if we start developing some common indexes that would cluster together some of these ecosystem services. I remember I worked with a startup that had identified more than 37 different services, and I had to tell the founder that that's great, but it's also an issue because it's too complex to communicate to anyone who's supposed to buy these ecosystem services. We have it with the CO2E, but I think we need more of them, whether it's for water or for biodiversity. Personally, in my work, that has been the hardest to quantify for decision makers. What is it worth, biodiversity, compared to clean water or clean air? That has been a lot easier. But quite often we need to make it simple so that they can make hard choices. And I think we're still lacking when it comes to communicating the value of different ecosystem services and making it something that people can communicate easily.
Thanks, Martin. I see Gonzalo has raised his hand.
Yes, just to clarify my point, also because there is a question here in the chat, and about how we can engage the citizens, and of course there is a need of information, but what is interesting in this co-creation process is the sharing of information from the scientific people and researchers that are, of course, working in the field with these solutions, with the everyday experience of the people. And that experience is very important for the researchers and for the technicians as architects or landscapers, because the people know their territory much better than any scientist in a certain sense. They work there, they cultivate there, they cross that territory every day. So there is a knowledge there that we need to incorporate in our process. And of course, they also need to incorporate some scientific knowledge. And it's very interesting because most of the times they know more than we think about scientific process, because people are nowadays much more educated than they were before. So people that are interested in knowledge, and they are willing to attend workshops and seminars that we can make available for them. So it's really an opportunity of sharing knowledge when we work in the field directly with the people, building together solutions. So it's important that we are there. It's important that the politicians are there. There is an amount of associations working in the cities everywhere, in neighborhoods, across the city, that has a lot of knowledge and experience. And I think we need to incorporate that knowledge in our process. And that, of course, is a position that the experts need to give the floor to the other people. And that's not easy to do because we know that we were trained for 5 years with masters, PhD, and so on. But sometimes we need to give the floor and to learn with the others.
And on that note, I'm going to give the floor to the questions in the chat. So we have a lot of interesting questions in the chat. So Pratyusha, if you would like to unmute and ask your question directly, that's super welcome.
Yes, I can do that. So my first question, I have a couple of questions actually. My first question is for Nana. I would like to know how we can bring some of the solutions that we talked about into cities, which are already very dense and have a lot of high traffic, you know. The example that you gave, which was, there was a roundabout, and I noticed that a lot of pedestrian and bicycle pathways were introduced. So in cities where the traffic is very high and so on, how do we integrate such solutions?
That is a very good and complicated question. I mean, obviously there's some tough priorities in how to use the square meters of cities. And I think the first thing is that there will usually always be space if there is the will. But you will also probably need to sacrifice maybe a car lane or parking or the width of a sidewalk. And I think that's an exercise that at least we do quite often, that it's optimizing the space that we're using. But it does take some will for especially municipalities to kind of prioritize the space in the city and who should have first rank. And I think in that sense, actually, also the comments from Gonzalo about including citizens is going to be so important, about like the people who live there, what are their wishes and preferences for the city that they live in. But obviously infrastructure is a super difficult question because the city needs to function as well. And I think we are often as well really challenged with subterranean infrastructure, like all the pipings underground is often like a really, really big challenge because you might find the overground space, but then you dig directly into pipes. But I think maybe also here, it also becomes important to think about the solutions shown by, for example, Chiara, that utilizes vertical surfaces and build structures, and not just the planes of on the street level or the squares. To kind of think of the city as an entire system where all surfaces can kind of contribute.
Right. So the solution, Chiara's solution that you just mentioned, I have a question related to that as well. So when we cover our vertical facades with such elements, you know, for carbon sequestration benefits, and even like food or construction material production, the example that she gave, when we are covering up our facades with such elements, how would these interventions affect ventilation and just the general quality of life inside the buildings? And is there a way to optimize, you know, these quantitatively?
I understand that this question was for me, no?
Yes.
Okay,
Please.
great. So how to optimize the interior part, the microclimate and envelope. By the way, this is also a question for Katya. It's in our case, I can tell you that it really depends on the system that you are using. In general, you can also add a layer of isolation, of course, between the system and the building, and this can always help. In general, what we are trying to do is, but more than adding a layer of isolation, is to use the morphology and the material in order to create an optimal microclimate. So it's the system itself what we try to optimize. So we treat the surface in a certain way that maybe if we have a problem of an environment which is very warm, we try to create like shadowing systems through the morphology and to create using the morphologies, and also the materials that we use. It depends on the performance that we would like to have. So it's really working on local conditions, local microclimate, the shape of the element, and using the morphology to modify the climate within and around the building.
Okay, yeah, that answers my question. Thank you so much, both Nana and Chiara. Thank you so much.
We have a question from Sara in the chat. I don't know if Sara, you'd like to unmute and ask your question. Sara? Okay. Sara was asking in relation to the nature-based solution interventions, can we use them without causing gentrification? And what are your thoughts in relationship to gentrification and nature-based solutions? I don't know if Gonzalo, maybe you want to that, yeah?
No, it's a very good question. It's really, of course, when you do urban regeneration, either if it's in a more general way or in a very specific way, there is a challenge of gentrification, because you are qualifying the public space, you are giving better quality to people. And that's really a challenge that we are facing, for instance, because when you are dealing with nature-based solutions and when you are engaging citizens on that process, you take the risk that those people will not benefit the work they are doing, and also the value they are creating with their solutions and their involvement. Because the value of the land and the value of that urban area might take those people, especially when you are working in deprived areas, might take that people out of that area. So it's a big risk that we are trying to face with involving the municipalities and in this process, in order to create a kind of agreement, of a community agreement, to guarantee that the people that are involved will take the right to live in that area. And I think today the municipalities are every day more aware of the need of creating a balance of the several layers of the society in the different urban areas. But in fact, it's a big challenge for gentrification.
Thanks, Gonzalo. We have a question from Gabriela Gonzalez. Gabriela, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, hello, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Gabriela.
Ciao, Matilde. So my question is, well, it was for Nana, but I think it's also for Chiara. This concept of biomimicry is personally an obsession that I have, and I keep wondering how much of, I mean, do you ever always, I don't know, take it in consideration when you are trying to, when you are creating these urban proposals, or is it for some reason, I don't know, too expensive, or too, there's perhaps too little research about it, or is it something that always comes to mind to you?
I can start. I think it's a kind of the basis of our practice that working with the functions of nature is the premise for our design work. And I think I mean in terms of working with nature-based solutions, I think it's so important to remember that it's not necessary. I mean, it's not strictly necessary that it actually looks like a kind of nature that we already know. It's important that it functions as nature. So I mean, in terms of biomimicry, it's the functions that we are seeking to kind of recreate. So I think, I mean, in order to kind of avoid greenwashing, we need to be very ambitious on behalf of the nature that we design. I don't know, Chiara, if you have a comment.
Yeah, or maybe Katya as well.
Is Chiara going ahead? Chiara?
Go, Katya.
Okay. So yes, actually, what Nana was saying, I completely agree. Yes, you have to, it's a challenge anyway from all the sides possible. What I was talking about also before, I didn't mention too much the greenwashing effect. This is something that was just a few years ago defined, but it's something that we face quite often. And so when I was talking before also about the possibility of balancing cost-effective and stuff, it's not only about the economic cost, it's also about, for example, the environmental cost and the relation between, in general, what you can achieve and what you need to leave. So like compromising. So this is also connected to what we were saying before about all the difficulties that we all at some point saw when we're talking maybe with the municipality or with some people. So with engagement of people in an area. So just to make sure that they will somehow understand and that the importance of such nature-based solutions is clear and can be accepted, so that people can be ready to maybe give up on something like a parking lot, as Nana was saying before.
Thanks, Katya. I don't know if Chiara, you want to jump in on that?
Very quickly, biomimicry. In our case, there is a certain species that we try to implement and make grow in the city, we look at the place where it's growing naturally, because the urban environment, it's most of time not a friendly environment to grow plants. Apart a very few range of species, then there are conditions where the many plants finds hostile and difficult to live in, and therefore we look like, for example, in the case of the aerial plants or the epiphytes, to their natural environment and its conformation, to try to understand which is the morphology, what are the materials, is there anything that we can understand, keep and bring to the city through operation of biomimicry. So we try to study the natural environment where the plants is growing and living, to understand what we can learn from this environment.
Thanks, Chiara. We have time for well, we don't have time, but I will let one more question. I don't know if Alex, you wanted to ask a question about the current pace of implementation in Europe?
Hello. Yes, thank you, Matilde. And thank you to everyone in the panel. It's a very interesting discussion. My question was mostly related to, let's say, the end goal that Gonzalo was mentioning at some point, because in the end, this is a means to an end. I totally agree with this. So my question is, based on the current pace of implementation of such solutions around Europe, what do you think is the estimated time to reach a maturity level and for these solutions to become common practice? Are we going fast enough to reach our goal? And if not, what are some important steps that specifically institutions can take to aid the acceleration of these processes? Thank you.
I don't know, since Gonzalo has had to leave, I don't know if Gonzalo with a C wants to take that question.
Sure, if I'm able, but no, of course, I think it depends on what solutions we are talking. I think there are solutions that are already part of the everyday life of the cities. We see a lot of cities, and we are working Urbinat from cities from north to south, east to west of Europe, and we see very advanced urban plans and municipal strategies that already include a very interesting approach to nature-based solution, especially the ones that are more related with urban farming and green areas and renaturalization of streams. So those are quite integrated in the everyday life of the politicians, and also in the what people understand that is important for their cities. Of course, we saw today more advanced solutions, I would say, more challenging solutions, and for that I think we need more time. But we see that there is also an important thing that I believe it will have some impact, and we saw also today some approach to the children, and I think that's where we find the most enthusiastic part of the population with nature-based solutions. There is already today a very interesting self-conscience of nature-based solutions and a green approach to the city, let's say, with the children in the schools that we work together a lot with the children. So I believe that the next generation will be a generation that for sure will fight for the nature-based solutions in our cities.
Thanks very much, Gonzalo. And
an optimistic end.
Yes. So with that optimism, I'd like to thank all the speakers so much for your time and sharing your thoughts, your experiences with us all. It's been a fantastic discussion, so thank you all so much for this. Thank you to everyone who attended. It's been great to have your questions. I know there are lots more questions. Maybe we'll be able to answer them a little further on in the year. So we'll be hosting our Responsive Cities Symposium in mid-November this year, and it will be focusing on designing with nature. So that might be an opportunity to ask more questions and share more thoughts with everyone. So thank you, everyone, speakers and attendees. I hope you have a lovely evening. And I hope you've all gotten some tools and some understanding as to how we can design with nature, collaborate with nature, and work together with nature in our urban environments, transitioning towards, let's say, a greener and brighter future. So thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening and all the best.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.